welcome you, dear attendees, to the 10th symposium at the Arab Center for Research and Policy. We shall discuss policies in the Gulf within the politic and cultural transformations. We start with Dr. Zaid bin Ali Al-Fadil, who shall be talking about cultural transformation. He is an author of various publications and as the director of the Cultural Center in Saudi Arabia. He has a certificate in cultural studies. He was in charge of the cultural program 2014 and the international book fair. He was on the board of trustees on many cultural accolades such as Qais accolade and the upcoming author award. He has various cultural activities in theater, conferences, and cultural events. He has participated in TV and radio programs on the Memory of a Human program and the program of Cultural Circus in Jeddah. He has participated in writing the Jeddah Encyclopedia. Please go ahead and present your paper in no more than 20 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. And I thank my colleagues for giving me this platform. And thank you, dear attendees who have taken the trouble of sitting here to listen to what I have to say. So transformations, it's an important topic, and Saudi Arabia is taking the lead in the Arab arena right now. And transformation, Dr. Mehi said he wrote an 8,000 word paper. I have written a paper of 10,000 words on this subject. Transformations is a very important topic, and they are not necessarily positive, not necessarily negative as well. It is a trait of vitality in any community. Any community lives through transformation, is a vital community and not a frozen community. So I believe they are a good idea. Transformations are a good idea. The question is, we are living in route-based transformations. In 5 years in Saudi Arabia, we had a great momentum of transformation. I, as Zaid, have not grasped them all, even though I live in Saudi Arabia. So that leads us to think of everyone following up on the cultural arena in Saudi Arabia from the outside. So let us talk about the 5 years where these transformations took place in this context of openness, this context that we witness today. Of course, it is all thanks to the political leadership and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who was, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have witnessed the transformation. We have surface level transformation right now, surface level in behavior, and that's good, and it's a first step, but they haven't cracked the depth of ideology, identity, and mindset that need to distinguish Saudi people particularly. Let me put the basis for this idea. So, since its establishment, Saudi Arabia was living an intellectual renaissance in the area of Hijaz, or the Western area as we call it today. It is a historically cultural area that had many scholars, scientists, and cultured people from various areas of the earth. Al-Hijaz is the only area where we have people from all ethnicities, races, religions, because Mecca and Al-Madinah are in this region, and they have this case of acculturation. Acculturation happened in Hijaz hundreds of years ago. I had written a paper in 2003, which is acculturation and the Mecca culture, and it was published at the time. So these people have lived cases of transformation that were integrated later on and became one identity. When Saudi Arabia was established as a modern state, they became an integral part of the country, and they have become the basis for cultural life in Saudi Arabia. This area or this region, Al Hijaz, had journalism, constitutional institutions in in the era of Ottomans, the Ottoman Empire, and also we had the literary people. And then we had the Saudi arena in the modern state, which put the basis for cultural movements. The book Khawatir Musarraha is one of the most important books. It was printed in 1925, was authored by Hassan Awad. And Khawatir Musarraha, or Expressed Thoughts, that's the title of the book. The spectators in Saudi Arabia find that there is a great evolution that came about with the help of Hassan Awad from his own environment. And we have in the world of novels, we have Ahmed Sbai. He is the sheikh of journalists. He wrote a novel called Idea. It talked about women. It was printed 1949. So the cultural life and the social life in Saudi Arabia was good. It was strong, based on the cultural life that was already in Al Hijaz, and then the cultured people who came along and became advisors for the state in that time and formed a great momentum of the cultural identity in Saudi Arabia. When we came and the years passed by, there was an ideological aspect. We had nationalist people, leftist people, the leftist movement and the Pan-Arab movement and the Nasiri movement, they were all there. And even the beginnings of political Islam was present in Saudi Arabia. So that we were living this transformation. But this transformation and this cognitive context that was in Saudi Arabia and was part of the cultural dialogue and the cognitive dialogue had a clash from the beginning with the religious bigotry and the ideological the extreme ideological obstruction. So we have Sheikh Ahmed Subai, one of the pioneers in journalism in Saudi Arabia. He's from Mecca. He is a historian as well. He wanted to do theater in the 60s, and he recruited a director from Egypt, and he established a stage. And he called it Quraysh Theater, and he wanted to open the theater for a play. After the direction and the acting and the rehearsals, this theater was completely cancelled. This is where the religious extremism started, and King Abdulaziz was able to, or he had a modern ideology, and also King Faisal had a modern ideology in this aspect, the aspect of dealing with the religious trend. Of course, he had the problems with the leftists and with the progressive movements and with the nationalists, because the political conflict at that time was between the Pan-Arab movement headed by Nasser and the conservative movement on the other hand. But in that framework, we had great efforts by King Faisal in finding a kind of community modernization within the behavioral trends that we had. And the challenge at that time was religious. The religious challenge left its footprint, but we had people who resisted this challenge. So change happened, transformational change happened, and religious people were able to domineer the cultural arena in the 80s. Why in the 80s? Because in the 80s there was the Juhayman movement, and we had the Islamic revolution in Iran. And we had the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. So even though we had eradicated Juhayman as a movement, but we imported their thoughts because we needed political Islam to face the Irani ideological expansion and to mobilize people against the Soviet Union, of course, with the Western willpower, and to create this jihadist movement that we had in Afghanistan. So the attitudes changed in Saudi Arabia. Politically, the ruling was open and it was inclined to modernity and to progressive movements, even preserved liberalism or conservative liberalism. But politicians had to accept the religious, and so we had the Sururi movement, the Muslim Brotherhood, and we had the new term, al-Sahwa or Renaissance. It is a term that calls the Islamic extremist movement at that time. We started facing that. We have Dr. Baz'i and Dr. Khawaja here. At that phase in the 80s, we had a different stage, the stage of modernization, because some of higher education or graduates came back to face the religious extremism, and this modernity proved itself in the 80s in the cognitive context. But was it prevailing? No, it did not prevail. Did it access the community? No, it did not. It was in its own bubble. In that 80s, I was a college student and I was a modernist. I stood with the modernism, but I felt alienated. I came from Hijaz with a different mentality. Oh, I was open. I did not take these other contexts in Saudi Arabia, such as in Najd and so on. I felt like there is exclusion between modernists, exclusion of modernists from the community. We are modernists, if you want it or not. Since we have the holy mosques in Saudi Arabia, we will never cancel religion, but we need moderate religiosity that is based on modernity and moderation. However, we had the Salafist trends that were extreme in their attitudes. It's really not about things being black or white. It is more complicated than that. So this is the arena that we had, which is affected Saudi Arabia at that time, and we had some integration, some transformation in the era of King Abdullah. The real transformation that happened, or the explosion in this transformation, was in 1918 with the adoption of 2018, when Mohammed bin Salman adopted modernization, and we had the Ministry of Culture. Of course, the Ministry of Culture, the culture in the past, we did not have any entity responsible for culture in Saudi Arabia, even though it was an advanced, the culture was in advanced stages. It was under the Ministry of Youth previously, but with King Abdullah, we had the Ministry of Culture, and it was integrated with media. So it's the Ministry of Culture and Media, and it was headed by Dr. Adi Abdul Swayel. Dr. Saad also was one of the personalities who were in that phase, and other people. And we created a great cultural arena in that time. And then the Ministry of Culture was separated from media. It is now the Ministry of Culture, and it transcended its limited framework from the UN definition of culture. And now we have 11 entities, 16 sectors, and we have come up with other frameworks. We have the authority of fashion, we have the authority of culinary arts. These are all affiliated with the Ministry of Culture. These are all previously were not part of culture, but in Al-Hijaz, they were accounted for because the community of Hijaz, we have the Mecca cuisine and the diverse cuisine and this type of integration. So this ministry today, with its goals that it aspires to achieve, I say in the paper, of course, I'm trying to speed up. I don't know how much time I have. We cannot give prejudice today about all of this. As a cultured person, I have some reservation with the cultural situation today. There are some goals that I couldn't grasp to this moment. However, despite my reservations, I cannot issue prejudice against this experience until we move forward. Of course, time plays a great role in that. For example, and here in the paper, I have quoted the goals of the Ministry of Culture for at the moment. Among the challenges that the Ministry of Culture faced was the ideological challenge. This is important, and we said that there is a sovereign decision by Emir Mohammed bin Salman on this regard. But we moved from one state to another state here. I think that the Ministry of Culture, it's important for the Ministry of Culture to do certain things. Of course, we rejected the Salafist ideology that prohibited many cultural events and persecuted cultured people and fought against their experiences. However, we also want to create another balanced ideological state. We don't want to leave this extremist ideology into a void, a state of void. And in my paper, I said that we are really moving into void, and this will create a disaster in the future. Today, our young people do not have cultural spaces for that. I am an Arab person. I have this cultural identity, leftist, progressive, even Islamic moderate identity. But today we do not have these identities that we can base ourselves in. And this is one of my concerns. In other frameworks, the kingdom has been witnessing, of course, I had a chapter called Cultural Forums and their roles and the Jeddah, Riyadh, and Ahsa. These are the main three areas. And they had a great role. Some forums had a great role. You all know about Rashid al Mubarak Forum. May he rest in peace. These forums presented a cognitive conceptualization, and now we have a new product in the Ministry of Culture. It is a good product, which is the literal partner or the literature partner to promote culture and take it from its elites into the popular groups. And so this product would be in cultural cafes. But this product is administered, it is managed by non-balanced people who do not know anything about culture. However, they issue the permit from the Ministry of Culture, they fill the agenda, and they use all the privileges granted by the Ministry of Culture, and they provide non-original knowledge. Some people provide original knowledge, but they are few, and many of the cultural cafes being managed is not presenting or providing that. So my problem is with cultural cafes that neutralized forums. We have an institution that started in 1975, 50 years until now, and we have the Saudi Association, 16 clubs. I have reservations against the latest administrative councils, which were dominated by Islamists late in the age of King Abdullah's era. But it doesn't mean that we need to cancel them out. Now, we have 16 branches of these councils since 1975. We shouldn't just annul them. These are some of the reservations that we need to talk about with the Ministry of Culture. The penultimate thing is, I feel Dr. Saad, he is here. He is the main advisor to the Ministry of Culture and the main people at Ministry of Culture. I feel like the generation that practiced culture at a time where the storms were raging against them are excluded. They were persecuted, they were prosecuted, they were imposed early retirement, and I'm one of them actually. Why? Because we said something that was not of appeal to other parties. So these people are neutralized. They could have been a bridge between pioneers and the new cultural generation. So today the culture in Saudi Arabia on the outside is recreational. It is not related to the in-depth culture. And I concluded in this subject. Of course, the paper talks about many things in acculturation, and I talked about the traits of the cultured people. Mentioned that the void moves the accultured people. Young people are moved by this void. Social media platforms have popularized this culture. Anyone who writes on WhatsApp calls himself an author or a media man, media person. And we have the blogs or newspapers, and everyone has started considering themselves authors and writers, and they just copy and paste everything. This has created a void because these young people are not finding a cultural institution that is capable of basing itself on the national state, the religion. So we're leaving this school and moving into this new school that needs to guarantee the identity of the Islamic community, such as Dr. Mehi said. The rational school needs to be there to strike a balance in this arena that we are witnessing. Many things that we can say. However, I just gave you an abridged version, and if you read my paper, of course, there's lots of talk about the clash between the heritage and modernization, because I think that modernization has domineered the arena. Dr. Saad is here with me now, and he is reissuing the books on modernization as if we are going back to the 80s, and wrote a piece on that as well. I'm against going back to the 80s, to Spinoza and Kant and all of these people. I believe that we need to create our own cognitive bridge and go back to read our intellectual heritage in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for you have moved us from the transformation of the policy, knowledge, modernity, and when the Q&A session opens, I have a question. Thank you very much for your presentation. I will speak about Vision 2030, the policy of secularizations and the building of a new Saudi citizens. This paper will be delivered by Dr. Abdullah Boulouz. Dr. Abdullah is research in social anthropology. He has an MA in social anthropology and BA in from York University, power engineering. He has worked as a researcher, translator, a freelance translator, and he has published a number of articles as well as translations. He focuses on the identity formation and intersection with the social and economic components of the society. The queer theory at intersections with the Islamic society, as well as and the impact of globalization and the neoliberal economic policies on the situation in the Arab region. You have 20 minutes to deliver your paper. Good afternoon to you all. My paper speaks about the social political transformations that has led to Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia, and it tackles the leverages and the instrumental components that led to Vision 2030. The essential question here, why this vision has been adopted and implemented in this juncture, and why it was not developed and implemented in previous eras. My research go beyond the dominant narrative concerning the diversifications of the Saudi economy and the social evolution. When I raised this question, why the vision came at this very time and with this magnitude, is the economic component is the main, or there are other plausible drivers that could explain why the vision came about at this time. This paper aims at discuss the social policies that have stemmed from this vision. This allows us to compare it to previous policies in Saudi Arabia and the local and regional context. So this paper aims at monitor the impact, as it is clear in the title of this paper, Vision 2030, the policy of secularizations and the building of the new Saudi citizens. So it's very important to know and learn about these drivers, take them into context, taken into context of the social transformation changes. So the new title of this paper that I would I see more or deem more appropriate is Qatar Vision, Saudi Vision 2030, understanding the social changes and political transformations in Saudi Arabia. Literature are divided that monitor the drivers and the root causes behind this vision to three. The first part is the literature that tackles the economic necessities. Supporters, proponents of this driver of this believe that the position it came as a response to the fluctuations of the oil prices and try to move away from the parental economy, and the other part of literature speaks about the trying to achieve regional leadership by Saudi Arabia. Those who wrote in this context believe that Saudi Arabia has promoted itself as the leader of the region. This is in line with the classical neoclassic theory that this approach started during the leadership of King Abdullah after the fall of the Iraqi regime and the gradual withdrawal of the United States from the region, and continued during King Salman's reign and the heir to his death throne. The economic reforms are an extension to the reforms that has started during King Abdullah reign, which aims to have a more leadership role through creating a more balanced economy. Also, there are studies that focus on the centralization of the social transformations. The proponents of this approach believe that this track goes beyond the regional transnational. Anas Al Ahmed published a book, and the struggle of internments, and yes. So in his book, he provide a vision that main objective of this vision is take into account the social transformations which carries political dimensions. Also, he argues that the leadership in Saudi Arabia as part of the post-colonial era has been affected by the capitalism and neoliberalism, and this modernity is a political tool that is used by the elite that aims to establish stronger relations with more influential entities. Al Ahmad follows these new changes, starting from King's Abdullah reign, where these changes and transformations has been manifested in the establishment of King Abdullah Science and Technology, which made the Big Bang. The difference between the changes during King Abdullah reign and the current changes are related to the magnitude. The current changes and transformations has built on the previous heritage and amplify these changes through mitigating and watering down the restrictions, especially when it comes to gender equality and opening the entertainment industry, as well as limiting the influence and the control of Hayat al-Amr bil Maruf. Also, the investing in sports heavily, as in addition to other changes. Al Ahmad argues this is related to social engineering to wipe out all means and manifestations of the fundamentalism that was promulgated by Dr. Muhammad Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab. The theoretical framework includes three approaches: James Scott approach and his student Clifford Jones, and Polman and Poblanka about the role of the individuals in the state. I'll try to mix between these approaches to provide to constitute a framework that is capable of explaining this phenomena as a political phenomena. James Scott, in his book, how can you see how to see as a state, and how some approaches that aims to enhance the welfare of the people fails. He speaks about mega projects uh, carried out by the states to establish new societies. Usually, such mega projects yield or results into catastrophes that has negative impacts on societies. The states impose in addition, Scott says that some of the policies are being implemented that take into account the needs and the necessities of the people, and it has inadvertently it has impacted inadvertently negatively on the welfare of the people. And most of these policies are based on globalized capitalist policies that leads to oversimplifications, which is to make profits and try to establish new social norms. The second approach is the Clifford Jones, which emphasizes on the role of the individual and emotional preferences. Clifford Jones developed this vision based on her ethnographic work on UAE, where she focused on how the elite Scott believes that the source of these visions are stems from their individual experiences and especially the elite during their studies outside abroad, and they believe that they can copy these experiences locally. The third approach is Wyman and Pullman. It is such an old paper that was published in 2003. Reconstitute the role. Let us pay great, which emphasizes the leadership role of individuals in the government or in the state to study the policies of the states. Based on these three approaches, we can say that the current discussions concerning the social engineering and their impact on the social and economic transformations reveals the roles, the conclusive roles in shaping the future identity of the people. Scott eliminate the probable impacts of social engineering, which would lead, where Hamid and Jones provide a contradictive point of views. Jones focuses on the individual influences. A very important point I would like to highlight, which is fundamental to my paper, is the role of the leading elites and moving from the horizontal approach to the vertical approach manifested in the appointing Mohammed bin Salman as the crown prince. This transformation, historical transformation in the leadership process came in line with the vision, the transformations and changes that are very much linked to the image of Mohammed bin Salman as the leader of the journey to the future. I'm still working on this paper, and this it still requires refinement. So I welcome any questions and contributions. With this, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Mr. Jassim Hassan Al Ghait will discuss cultural policies in the Gulf facing globalization, acculturation, and cognitive hybridity in the approved culture project. Mr. Jassim is a professor in the International Institute of Arts. He has a PhD in contemporary arts. He has publications in Masa theater play and acculturation in Kuwait, Shakespeare as a model. Thank you. Please go ahead. You have 15 minutes. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, I will be talking about a lengthy study and years of experience, over 15 years of experience in this regard. I will talk about acculturation and cognitive hybridity of approved culture project, a study in cultural policies of the Gulf states. Cultural policies means trends, and before we say trends, let us say something that is important, which is the culture of differences. This is the problem that we have been facing for a long time. The climate for difference, the culture for difference, and not the difference itself. This is the important part, which is more important than the policies that we are talking about, and I will address them momentarily. So this study talks about the interculturalism and cognitive hybridity And these are among the key transformations witnessed by the Gulf culture right now, especially in the age of globalization and the visions, the political visions, national institutions, and accredited institutions, authority, between quotation marks, and the approved culture. As we say, if colonialism goes, globalization comes. And here I specify this cognitive structure with the historical space, which is the contemporary time in which we live. And acculturation is the social processes where we get knowledge from education, family, institutions, and so on. And cognitive hybridity is the fingerprint of a certain era. Acculturation and cross fertilization, these terms have taken a more positive sense compared to hybridity. So interfertilization was labeled as a positive. The approved culture is the culture of the state, the culture that the state takes as a system and an approach, and that the national legislative institution promotes throughout education, formal cultural institutions, and so on. And this is a form of the approved culture. However, if we are to look at the Gulf culture, we find that it is a culture based from the roots of the Arab Islamic culture. This is the reality. We are talking about that. A part of this that we will discuss first is the policies and authority and the crisis of the cultured elite with this authority. These are key factors in the effectiveness of these policies. The first part is one of the concerns of those opposing the authority is first, the authority shouldn't intervene in cultural policies. Why? They say because this gives the humans or puts humans in a mold desired by the state. And the centers that are under the umbrellas of government institutions are not qualified to provide opinions. Of course, these are academic, formal institutions. What else? So these centers are regulated according to the benefits of those working in them and in the fear of doing something that does not satisfy the decision makers. Also, skepticism in the approved culture and fair participation by all national individuals. Skepticism in national culture, and that every citizen can fairly provide their opinions on this culture. Five, cultured people are hostages of eternal institutions dominating their culture. If the authority intervenes, this cultured person is a hostage with these institutions. They form their awareness or take a huge piece of forming his awareness. Those upcoming cultured people who assume decision making positions only achieve that and after pledging allegiance to the authority religiously and to the totalitarian authority. And so employing a long line of cultured people and involving them in delusional or non real slogans such as strategic planning, future development. This annuls the space between cultured people and decision makers, cultured people, and the policymakers, because these are long term projects and so they guarantee neutralizing cultured people. So if they place them in these committees, then they are neutral, they don't count. And so also the loss of the major projects such as the pan-Arab idea, Islamic ideas, this has left these policies to go under categories, certain categories, races, and so on, and they are dominating these trends. Those supporting this culture, this these policies and the intervention of the state. They say that no one negates the role of national institutions in providing education to the great majority of people, and these institutions' role and the authority's role, or the role of the institutions supported by the authority in promoting culture, in issuing publications and education. You may not be able to access this quality education had it not been for these institutions. There are many publications and works that the state subsidizes and private institutions cannot afford. Also, people's right to build the cultural project based on their identities. This is the right of the state and the institutions to build their projects and to form the awareness of the citizens according to their identities. And three, where is the decision support from the elite? If the elite alienates itself from these policies and their role in these policies and their involvement in the committees, then who will support decision making? Surely this decision will lack the cultured elite, which should be supporting this process. Talking about the constitution, the issue of the constitution, and that it uses the Arab culture, that this is realistic. All constitutions in the Arab world say that these are Arab Muslim states. This is reality. And so the identities of these communities are necessarily Arab and Islamic, as like Dr. Zaid said, these institutions remain also when culture does not dominate community. This leaves area for tribalism, sectarianism, and other movements to fill this void with the lack of the civil society organizations and the approved cultures. These movements dominate because humans, they need these civil organizations, and yes, sectarianism and tribalism trends may control the arena. So when we have authority-based institutions, you can have an opinion on them, but when it's all sectarianism and tribalism, you cannot provide an opinion on them. So sponsoring these policies by the state is important. And symbolism of Islam and the Arab identity. What unifies us is the Arab identity and the Islamic cause. Of course, we respect all religions, but this is a very important issue to us. Last but not least, those opposing the intervention of elites in policies and the states, the authorities' policies and their involvement in these committees demand stating the literature in modernization. But isn't that intervention by your group? Who will place strategies in the shape of vision and laws? They even accuse each other of treason when some of them are involved in committees. So this is a real crisis that we are living in, and non-rational criticism. So another part is the hybridity mechanism. The Gulf culture is not all about the sea and its symbols and the desert and its symbols. It's a deep rooted culture, and the, our concept of culture has certain trends. One of its definitions is believing in democracy, freedom, and equality. So, is believing in democracy part of culture? Do we know democracy in its real definition? We have the representative democracy, which is to elect a representative. This is part of democracy. This is the Athens. There's also the Athens democracy, where the elite only makes the decision. So democracy varies from a place to another. So do not impose your opinion in a community. The community knows better about its policies and its cognitive formation. One size does not fit all. It's not ideal for all. That it should be applied to all the societies. We move on to the issue of integration. Our communities were affected by the Persian civilization, many other civilizations, and benefited from them throughout the years. And with modernization and heritage, we have two models. The pre-modernity model and the post-modernity model. The pre-modernity is our forefathers who built ships from top to bottom. They lived in various stages and were able to digest the cultures from India, Persia, Turkey, and so on. They wrote about navigation. They have navigated the seas. They had a balanced acculturation in their age and day. I think they are civilized people. They were civilized people, answered civilized questions, provided a model. Why? We have the answer in economy. The uh, modernized people have consumed European modernity in its molds and its criticism and so on. But the pre-modernity people were civilized. They had coexistence with all religions, sects, ideas, colors, and races. They were tolerant in their ideologies and they created a lot. But this ideology stopped and we started a new type of modernization. The issue of culture and respecting others and expressing opinions on others is an issue that requires freedom and not talking about absolute values. For example, Ashian Bedi, she's an author, and in her book, The Fabric of Humanity, she said that the reorganization of the community will limit the religious and ideological chaos. Is religion chaos? Even if we are different religiously, this is not a chaos, but the absolute values, it- this is not the right way to go. This clash with the religious institution or intellectual institution is not freedom, is not does not give space for acculturation. Moving on to Foucault, which is the cognitive openness. This was his opinion, of course. What was said by Graham Cohen, he criticized the marketing of literature in post-colonialism. He says that literature in post-colonialism it scares communities that are under colonialism from the idea of the exotic intruder. It's like I'm terrorizing you of this intruder by intimidating this community from the intruder, the exotic. They will make them hold on to their heritage. Of course, that is the answer, to hold on to your heritage, to resist this colonialism, to do decolonialism. and to have a part of the acculturation that we see actually. This is an opinion. Of course, a lack of censorship. We talked about censorship. Look there to what is infiltrating our awareness. One of the books that was published by Ilaria, the past in common between the Arab world and the Western world. What does it say? It talks about ethnicities, migrating ethnicities, and the spread of Islam in the 17th century imposed a new culture, which is the culture of invaders, and they expressed themselves in a new Arab style and life. Is the Arab culture a culture of invaders? I believe that this acculturation has reached a point of dilution. It has diluted the Western icon and symbol and put it in the place of the Arab identity. And to just because I don't have time, I'll talk about cultural and ethnic pluralism. We are a small community and we have great aspirations. So we get the help of our friends from the Western societies and states. As Tahir bin Jalloun says in his book Racist, as I explained to my daughter, he says hosting countries need to teach their sons why migrant people came along and why they need migrant workers so that we could have a coexistence and tolerance that has that was in the region for years. These generations need to be educated, and their awareness needs to be raised. Why we need others, be it foreign generations or Arab generations, while preserving the local culture. So imagine, my brothers, some theater works that I followed in some publications. The Arab Muslim women, migrant women, illegitimately migrating, goes to a state, a Western European state, and she goes to the church and she starts believing in the in Christianity. And the writer was an Arab writer, and we had work from the Shakespearean heritage. Richard, the personality of Clarence. Clarence, he does ablation for prayers, and he starts praying. So what confusion are we creating in our awareness? See how the issue has become about replacement, confusion, and lack of awareness due to not caring about these policies and not forming the awareness properly. We respect others, we respect their culture, and we study their culture, and we take what is good for us while preserving our identity. I took too long. Thank you, doctor, but I just recommend and hope for a quick thought. Is the Arab other part of acculturation? Is there acculturation bit or a hybridity between Gulf people and Arab people? No, of course, because Arab persons have enhanced the accumulation on the knowledge accumulation in the Gulf. They are part of the system and they enhance it. It is not acculturation. What I recommend in by the end is that we care for these policies and to get Arab elites and foreign elites from all around the world, which enlighten this arena and give us a type of balanced acculturation and a climate of diversity, cultural diversity. Thank you, and I'm sorry for taking too long.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And linking all these terminologies with theories and concepts together. We have 15 minutes for Q&A and comments. We'll start with Dr. Saad Al-Bazai. Thank you, Ms. Aisha. I'd like to thank the panelists. I'm very pleased that the cultural landscape and Saudi scene is presented in three papers, which highlighted the some of the constants and changes witnessed in Saudi Arabia. My comment on Dr. Zaid's presentation, which I missed, however, the latter part of the presentation forced me to comment in the position of responsibility. I was honored to work in many cultural entities and institutions, the Ministry of of Culture and the Institution of Culture and Translation. However, my official tenure finished 6 months ago. I was not part of the setting up the policies of the Ministry of Cultures. However, I was part of the implementation process as a member of the council. However, my relationship with the Ministry of Information and Culture is deep-rooted. I was calling for establishing a cultural policies. What I would like to highlight or comment on was what Dr. Zaid mentioned about his critique of the work of the Ministry of Culture. He said there is a domination of the entertainment sector. The real issue in terms of the efforts of the ministry. Let me talk about the fundamental issue here is the domination of the economic aspects, not the entertainment aspect. So, as of trying to market the culture, and this is a value that is a part of the minister's strategy. What could be accepted by the public, what is published or translated, should have a widespread acceptance, and this led to the retreat or decline in the role of the elite. I believe that effort should be channeled to both parties, the elite and the public. The Minister of Culture support the serious aspects of the culture. The 6th of December, the third International Conference in Philosophy will be held, and this is a new phenomena to have such a conference, international conference, to be held 3 years in a row is commended. There are commended efforts in translation since its inception, also in theater that returned back to Saudi schools, which was absent during the era of extremism and fundamentalism. So philosophy is being taught in Saudi schools, and many teachers have been trained, to teach drama in schools. There are academies being established, also the theater and academies in drama are being established. Efforts are exerted to reignite the role of the public libraries in Saudi Arabia. I don't want to take long of your time. However, these are issues that need to be highlighted in addition to some of the shortcomings related to these efforts. However, I think the positive aspects are much more than the negative ones. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentations. I have a question. We are using terms and terminologies without any control. As you said, the internet, everybody has the space and time to when we speak about extreme Islam and moderate Islam. Netanyahu has his own version. Obama, who is the authority to behind these terminologies, which are could shape the ideologies of the people? Mr. Abdullah said about adopting extremist approach with towards women. However, is it logical to listen to a singer speaks about the female god? I don't wanna raise any sensitive issues out of my respect to the topic or the even the entertainment sphere. They are very much linked to our values. We should not. We don't want to go down the rabbit hole and just follow blindly what the West brings to us. I'm Judge Jibril, Palestinian researcher. The some believes that if we enter the modernization world, this will lead to better. Dr. Abdul Wahab al-Misiri says that demilitarization as a solution, and he gave an example in the first Palestinian Intifada in 1987 when Gaza is bombarded and there are no ambulances. We have seen donkeys and mules used to transport wounded and injured people. Saudi Vision 2030 includes a new liberalism spirit, which is in full contradiction with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the origin of the Salafi or the fundamental ideology or identity, which will never change. We know that identity can be developed and evolve. However, there are constants that cannot be. So I believe that Saudi Vision 2030 is not going the right track in comparison with Qatar Vision 2030. Qatar Vision did not relinquish its basic identities, and we have seen this in World Cup 2030. So as Dr. Abdullah Habib al-Mahsiri says that you can be modernized without relinquishing or and Mr. Brady in his book the modernity trap in 2006 I wrote an article or a study about the cultural impact. I wrote about the impact of foreign schools and scholarships to foreign countries. Also, how Saudi presents itself in the culture, the interfaith and inter-civilizations dialogue, and also the role of women. And the biggest challenge is the normalizations with Israel. If normalization happens, it will have a very adverse impact on Saudi Arabia that unexpected by the leadership elite. Also, I have written an article about the disguised normalizations with Israel, which has been in place for so long. I have a question which have this one thread among the three papers. My question about the struggling of the modernizations tracks in the Arab countries. We have to study the root causes behind this stumbling. Is it attributed to components or factors inside this track or external factors? Modernization, the West, in the West, it was possible because the intellectual and philosophical modernizations was very much linked to social component that was aspiring towards modernization. So modernizations was linked to the emerging bourgeois, which facilitate modernizations, whereas in the Arab region, those who carried the modernization project were not linked to such social component, emerging social components like the West. So the efforts towards the modernizations was isolated and just limited to those who believed in modernization, and this could be first a presumption or assumption. Also, the modernization efforts were linked to political decision. So the political elite decides whether the country would go towards modernizations or not. And therefore, the fate of the modernization track was linked to the umbilical cord, through umbilical cord with the political elite. So these modernization efforts just did leave some impacts. However, this was not translated and deep-rooted process. Deep-rooted culturally inside the local culture, as well as deep-rooted socially through alliance with the emerging elite who aspire towards more modernizations. We take 3 more questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Aisha. And I've noticed as a participant in the organization of this forum that we are going toward our position pertinent to Western modernization. This issue can be raised, or this question can be raised in other parts of the world. My personal position, I believe that discussing the modernizations is linked to policies Netanyahu and LGBTQ community. However, modernization is a must that we cannot. It is a collection of norms that has been developed throughout history. The source was. I cannot say that I'm against freedom, equality, or political participations or democracies. These values that that was created in the West and became part of our life. All central civilizations have influenced other communities, like the Islamic civilizations has contributed to that. The Kurd, the Persians adopted the language, the calligraphy, the Islamic. So I believe I am afraid that we are going as if we are judging the Western modernizations, and we want to go back to the era before modernization came about. Thank you, Dr. Aisha, and thanks. My question to Dr. Abdullah on the methodology. You have created a new approach, trying to understand Saudi Vision 2030 based on three approaches. Also, the three approaches have a different cultural context, value context, intellectual and ideological context, which is different from the Saudi context. I would like to highlight. Muhammad Al-Jabri, in his publication, The Critique of the Arab Mind, he alluded to this concept. Final question here. Final question because of so, Mr. Abdullah, if you would respond to the questions directed to you. The only thing that I want to comment on is the appropriateness of the academic approaches, especially when it comes to the methodologies. When you build on any conceptual idea, you are reformulating this concept to be aligned with the assumption that you raise, as if you are preparing it or modifying it to cater to the phenomena that you are studying. I have not alluded to this issue in my paper. The particularity of the Gulf area, it is a phenomena, political phenomena, and can be studied from this angle and through the political approaches and methodologies. And this is what we do in the academic sphere. I'm still a master degree student. I'm not a doctor. Dr. Zaid, if you have a comment. Thank you for the starting from Saad al-Bazai and the rest. Dr. Saad, maybe you missed my introduction. I highlighted and commended the transformation. What we have achieved in 5 years is more than is achieved in half a century. Indeed, the changes and transformations that we are living through are very important, and we cannot judge it now. However, these observations is aiming to enhance the process. We don't need to create or invent the wheel from and start from square one. When I talked about the absence of the balancing elite, which was existed, this is one of the reasons that makes the cultured people being apprehended about the future. You were very close to the cultural environment, and he was part of the Council of Literature. However, what we need now is more enhancements, more refinements. We are facing unprecedented phenomena. Saudi Arabia, nobody would imagine that music would be and this is positive and this is good. Also, drama and theater is very old in Saudi Arabia. I'm proud that I was the first who introduced the theater and drama in the book exhibition, and we were faced with backlashes from the fundamentalists and extremists. We need to establish the National Theater, the College of Art. We have the Red Sea Cinema Festival, one of the biggest. However, don't have a cinema or movie industry. Yes, it's good to invite. However, we need to establish the bedrock before we create something big. We do not. In terms of quantity and quality, indeed, we are. Islam is the religion of tolerance and moderation, and Prophet Muhammad came to be this mercy for the mankind. However, there are nobody denies that ISIS is extremist. Al Qaeda. We're speaking about those terrorists or extremists who want to. We do not want to go back to the awakening period, which deprived us from the good aspects. However, any religion that is based on anti-biases is a religion of extremism, and any religion that opens this window is not extremist. And I'm not speaking about the Salafi identity, or speaking about the religious identity or ideology. The Salafi ideology should not be the dominant ideology in Saudi Arabia, but rather the religious identity, which has been known. We are, at the end of the day, we are Muslims. We cannot deny our identity. And also, women. We are speaking about the empowerment of women and returning the society to the human. We have Saudi Arabia was an open society throughout until the late 70s. I will concur with one colleague and disagree with the modernity tracks. Dr. Saad is an authority in this regard. Just copycatted the Western model modernizations when it came to us. It came with its own model. We remember that in the Dark Ages, in the 15th century, the Renaissance period led to the awakening, and they built their own culture based on their ideology, and they created this bridge that enabled them to reach modernizations, post modernizations. Unfortunately, we did not build on the rational scholar, and we have just adopted the Western models and adopted them fully. This form of modernity is very much linked to the pre-Islam fundamentals. So these values existed for centuries. Freedoms and liberties are deep rooted in our Islamic and Arab history. We cannot say that we are indebted to the West for humanity and a new book, humanity on its own strides. It criticizes the Western approach. Only I have 2 points. We in the Gulf countries, we are engaged in trade investments. However, we don't have industry. China, they have a culture, the culture of industry, manufacturer. They put the right person in the right place. Quality assurance, and through that they have created a new society. Dr. Haider, I would like to distinguish between centrality and imposing ideas. Centrality, the world is of centers and peripherals or parts. Since the collapse of the Ottomani, we became parts, peripherals rather than centers, and we're looking for centers to be satellite of this. I disagree with you when you said that the Islamic culture imposed values, and I beg to disagree. Spanish imperialism and what they did to the Inca civilizations, and the catastrophes that they have made. However, the Islamic civilization did not impose any values or in conclusion, I'd like to thank Dr. Zaid, Dr. Jassim, and Mr. Abdullah, and like to thank you participants for your invaluable contributions. Thank you very much.